Welcome, everyone. Some of you are right at the end. If you come to the middle, maybe it'd be easier for us instead of scanning the room. Anyway, the MC has already introduced you, but I'm just going to say that they all have impeccable CVs. You should read about them. I think diverse experiences that they will share with us from policy, mentoring, um, refugees and women and other groups. And we have a global World Economic Forum Global Youth Leader, right, of 2015. Young global leader. And on my left, we have the architect who you will hear. She does a lot of work with SDG, which is very important in sustainable development for companies. And last but not least is our digital Wei Suhua, the use of technology in education. And so we will hear, I'm going to divide the session into 5 minutes each, first round, to share with us, with your varied experience, we are going to learn a lot, how you have scaled new heights in your career. We start with my left, Ahila.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Okay, so as the first, I think, bear with me.
Sorry, is there a timekeeper for me? For 5 minutes? Every 5 minutes? No, I have to do it myself.
Looks that way. I'll try to keep within time, Tan Sri.
Can you do it for me? 5 minutes. Okay, start
now. Okay, so my name is Ahila. I'm a mother of two. I've worked in property development. As a trained architect, I worked in consultancy as well. Consultancy is hard for all of you who have ever been in consultancy. You know, it's hard. I then changed careers again and moved into nation building under a branch of Khazanah called Think City. Most of y'all would have heard of it. I'm changing careers again. I'm still involved in Think City, but I have my own organization which focuses on ESG. So if you look at my career, if there's anything that's constant about it, it's change, right? And I think that is probably what got me here. Not being afraid of change, understanding that from time to time, things change in terms of your personal life, in terms of the way your career is going, and you need to take that leap of faith. I have done it 4 times, from consultancy to property development to nation building and now to my own thing. Essentially, that is key. Be agile. Be agile. Along the way, you'll meet wonderful people that will help you. And I've been very lucky because I come from an industry, the built environment is predominantly men. There are very few women, especially in positions of authority, if you will, or in higher parts of the organization. And I've always had men who helped me along, so that's key. Learn from anybody that you can, that's important. Be humble, that's key, right? If there's anything, you don't know anything. That's absolutely the truth. You don't know anything, be humble enough to know you don't know anything, and use that as a way that it builds your strength in order to propel yourself when it comes to your career. So being agile, right? Knowing when you need to make a change, because as a woman, you go through many different changes in your life. And that will be from being single to being married to becoming a mother. And all of this puts a twist. The burden is always heavier on the woman. I'm not belittling the men. I'm sure all of you do pull your weight at home, but there is a burden and expectation on women. So be agile to know that your career that you start with is not necessarily what you're going to end up with, right? Learn from everybody that you can. Don't discount people along the way. everybody's worth knowing, and be humble in asking for help. So I think that's sort of the key.
Yes, sure. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Su Hua. And just a little bit of a background about myself. I am an entrepreneur, so founder of a social enterprise focusing on nurturing the next generation of youths and what we call digital talents. Yeah, so I think on the topic of scaling new heights, just to let all of you know, I actually started this social enterprise right off graduation. So it's been quite a few years. And previously, my background was in neuroscience. And now I still try to continually apply neuroscience into our education design. So if there's any questions about that later, I'm more than happy to answer. So I think just talking about scaling new heights, starting with myself, what I observe to be the difference between people who can really accelerate their own growth and people who are dependent on others to grow is self-resourcefulness. I think that is extremely important. Whether or not we know how to look for the resources for ourselves to succeed in our careers and in our personal lives to scale new heights. So I think I'll just focus on that angle, being self-resourceful. And definitely, I think this is important for everyone, not just limited to females, but to every person of every single background. So I'll just start off with a very common theme, which is fear. Because I think, as you said, we have a lot of changes, right? And as we scale new heights, there are a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of discomfort. We need to put ourselves out there a lot, and there's a lot of fear of failure, fear of image, fear of loss, and all sorts of fear. And I think the first really important thing to become self-resourceful is to know how to embrace that fear with courage. And I think a common misconception is that, to be courageous means that you don't really feel as much fear. But actually, that is way too far from the truth, because to be courageous means fear is actually holding hands with courage. And it's walking forward together. So I think the first step to being self-resourceful is to accept that fear in the first place. And the second is to be intentional. Intentional in the way that we think, the way we feel, the way we plan everything. So there's a concept called golden circle. I'm not sure if people here are familiar with it. Golden circle. Is that something all of you are familiar with in the audience? Okay, or Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Start with why? Yeah? Okay, so I see a couple of nods around the room. So the golden circle, I'll just very quickly share about that. There's 3 circles. In the middlemost circle is why. And the second circle is how. And the outer circle is what. And I think being intentional is about going to the core and understanding the why. Being very intentional and starting with why. Why are we doing this? What's the objective? What's the purpose of me being here? What's the value that I want to create? And then, from there, go and define the outcomes. Once we know the why, what's the outcome that we want to create? What's the goal? What does it look like? How does it feel like? And then, only lastly, we go into the how, which is how do we want to implement that. And very often I see people, let's say New Year's resolution, right? We would say, I want to lose 5 kg, or I want to learn Spanish, or something, right? And we can see that that is actually the what. That's the outcome. And we try our best to come up with a lot of ways to learn Spanish or to lose that 5 kg. But sometimes we kind of lose sight of why we started in the first place. So I think being very intentional in that is extremely important, because when we can align our motivation to the objectives, to the why, then everything else just comes as a natural result. And it just becomes so much easier. So I think that's the 2 things that I want to share. Oh, and with the golden circle, I think a very interesting thing is one of my own discoveries is how do we use this golden circle? So there's a why, how, and there's what, right? And in the planning phase, we always start with why. From why, we go to what, which is defining the outcome. And then lastly, we plan how do we want to do that. But when we activate it, we go the opposite way around. We start with a why, we always remember the why, and we go through the how and actually do it, and the outcome is a natural result. So these are two things, accepting fear, embracing fear with courage, and second, being intentional by starting with why and planning with the what and the how. I think that's very key in how I found that I could scale new heights in the early part of my career, and hopefully that helps everyone as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to one.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tan Sri. First of all, let me thank KSI for inviting me as the representative from the Department of Women Development. And I believe this morning you have heard from Yang Berhormat, the Minister herself, Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Nancy Shukri. So today, in today's topic, first of all, we were very proud and to have this kind of programs to be held. Thank you so much, Tan Sri Michael and your team. You have done great and to get all the women and also some men who are here today. But when you're talking about scaling new heights, just let me share with you, I started joining the service, the government service in 1997. And during that time, there wasn't even a Ministry of Women. A Ministry of Women came about in 2001. So you could see the time difference. And I would say, I always believe in competencies. So you have to show that you can do the job. So that's where then you can get the recognition. But not just competencies, but also opportunity. So for me, in the government service, in 2004, the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development introduced the 30% women in decision-making policy, in the decision making. So the policy was introduced in 2004. And we could see the impact of the policy in which now, in the latest data that we had, actually I have a slide, but I'm not sure whether we have enough time to show it. There has been 38.8% of women at the premier grade in the public service. So that means we have achieved above the 30% target. So it shows that with merit and also opportunity that women are able to be at their best and perform at the top management level, at the decision-making level. So I hope there'll be more of these good opportunities to come in the future. And I believe Tan Sri herself has shown that she has been leading. She was the VC for the University Kebangsaan Malaysia. As of now, there are only 2 lady VCs, Tan Sri. Currently, yes. So we only have 2 vice chancellor female vice chancellor, one in UITM and one in University Technology Malaysia, Melaka. So there are only 2 out of 20 public universities in Malaysia right now. So we are, even though we have that number of 38.8%, but at the very top level, for instance, in the government, we have the Secretary General. Currently, there are only 5 out of 25 ministries that are led by women. So we are only, there's only 20%. So as you could see, even though we are having 38.8% of women at the premier grade Jusasi level, but at the top level, who are leading the ministries, we are still lacking behind. So we hope to see we have more women Secretary Generals, most probably in the near future. Thank you, Tan Sri.
Before I go on, I don't want to miss this opportunity because you're the only one in public service. What about you yourself, as you rise in rank? What were the things you faced and how you overcome? When you join, of course, I think it's in government. What is that? 42 or something. Ah, 41. Okay. Now you must be C or B or something, yeah? So this going upwards, apart from policy which came later, you joined in 1997, and the policy came very much later, 2013 or something, you know, although the ministry came in 2000. So what helped you to go up?
Thank you, Tan Sri. As I was saying before, for me, I believe in competencies. So when I joined the government, I only have a degree level. So I joined with degree level. But I had the opportunity to do my master. So I took up the opportunity in 2003 to do my master. And later on, I took up another opportunity to do my PhD. So this is where I believe for women out there, if you believe in yourself that you can do it, so you don't have to wait for others to push you, but really make it as your own target, that you want to be somewhere, and then that you can be at the same level with others. So for me, I believe in education and to have the knowledge to support you in whatever position that you're going to be in. So for me, that would be that I really appreciate to have the opportunity and to take that opportunity. And what Suha was saying before about courage. So even though I'm not sure whether I could do my PhD or not, but I took the opportunity, and Alhamdulillah, was able to complete my PhD. And I believe that's one of the things that also helped in my career.
Hello, my name is Natasha. I'm from Australia. I've been living in Malaysia for 16 years. So I've been proudly helping Malaysia to build the nation for 16 years. I work with underprivileged children, primarily refugee, young people, as well as women's leaders. In regards to mentoring, I think mentoring is the most vital thing that that enables the world to kind of like go around to really bring transparency. I think working with underprivileged people, and particularly boys, enabling them to have women leaders, it enables them to connect with them on a personal level, to connect with them on a personal level that enable them to, enable them to connect on a personal level in regards to like the social issues and the implementation of policies as well, because a lot of boys that maybe have kind of like different ideas to ourselves, the women leaders are enabled to love them through the hardships and to show them really the way to go. Sorry, I feel like fainting, I don't know. So enable... it's okay, I'll just carry on. So I just feel like fainting. They're able to love the children where they're at, and I think no matter how hard it is sometimes to love children, I think it's really important that we meet them at their level. Sorry, I think I have to sit down for a bit. I really feel lightheaded, sorry.
Natasha, you're done? You are. You want some water? I know. Okay. Okay, come, Vivian.
Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Terima kasih to Michael, good to see you again after Horace's last year, and to Jessie as well. Thanks so much for having me here to learn and to share what we know about leadership and to hopefully provide some insights for everyone as we go forward. It's great to return to KL as well. Wonderful food and people. So I'm Vivian Liu from Singapore. My mission essentially is to serve to better our world in addressing one of the key crises of our time, the climate change crisis, which I know to some seems like an imposition by some others, But if we look at the floods that have ravaged Malaysia, if we look at the evident impacts, for instance, COVID, because one of the clear impacts of climate change is an increased frequency and severity of epidemics, which because of our travel patterns and our fondness for freedom, obviously would turn into pandemics. So I think we'll touch on that later. So climate change matters, and it will wrought more devastating consequences than we've seen with COVID, which is why it's key, I felt, for us to proactively address it by decarbonization, by intelligent policies and all. My own background combines public sector reform at an international level at the World Bank. So in my undergrad days at Wharton, I think I was not very much focused on, the world and all. I think I was interested in finance because it felt right. And I was, reasonably good at it. But the 97 financial crisis caused me to deepen my reflections on our world. At that time, I was doing my summer internship at Morgan Stanley on Indonesian debt deals, so the very thing that sort of precipitated the financial crisis, right? So the following semester at Tsinghua University, where I was doing my study abroad, I felt that I saw the impact of the climate crisis on my friends from Indonesia, from Asia, from around the world. It made a huge impression. And so I decided that instead of returning to investment banking upon graduation, I wanted to try and join the World Bank so that for the next financial crisis, hopefully I can, support in finding a way to mitigate it so that it would be less damaging on us. And thanks to Wharton, Serendipity, and the World Bank itself, that actually happened. So the World Bank was kind enough to launch the Junior Associate Program to hire me as a professional straight out of undergrad. And for those who know the World Bank, if you don't have a PhD, you're not considered educated. So it was quite fortunate. So from then on, I became very focused on finding my North Star, finding sort of the best way to serve our region, the world. And that brought me from the World Bank to back to investment banking at Goldman Sachs, because I felt that the financial system, as the lifeblood of the global economy, is key to furthering changes for the good of society. And I think that same thinking would, in 2018, see me turn my enterprise, Philanthropy Works, from an impact investing, SDG-focused advisory firm into an exclusive climate-smart investing advisory firm, focused at that time on sovereign wealth funds and large hedge funds. So for instance, GIC and some others. So seeking to make a difference, and along the way, also serving, before returning to business school, also serving in Liberia as Doctors Without Borders financial controller, subsequently chief of staff to the UBS regional wealth management head, and so on. So all that experience in all three sectors at some very high-performing organizations has helped me to see the systemic links, to understand the incentives and constraints that each faces, And that has allowed me to play a role in furthering either, in-country, regional, or global solutions to, you could say, the climate crisis. So for instance, the 2015 haze crisis, I think a lot of people clearly played a role in that. President Jokowi of Indonesia, one of his key decisions in appointing Nazir Foyad as the head of the BRG, that was critical in moving things forward in a very substantive way, which is why we haven't had, significant wildfires over the past 8 years. But this year will be a test because of El Nino. So essentially taking an evidence-based approach, working with the top experts in key relevant areas to find a solution that is first best under the constraints or pushing the constraints. I think we might see a couple of examples later based on the questions that our moderator has. So I would just say that it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to serving and learning from you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the sharing. If I could just summarize before we move on to the next 5 minutes so that we are all on the same page. First, I must tell you, I'm a little bit deaf because I still have my eustachian tube blocked after a viral infection. But I think I got everyone down on my notes. So I think the key points, I think, is everybody, though they didn't use the word reflection, they did it to move along their career. And the reflection, I think, is like in two parts. First is on in the action, when they move, like Su Hua said, identifying the gaps, what are they missing, or what's the gap in knowledge, for example, the gap in skills and competencies, and asking all those key questions of why, how, and what, and moving in a very purposeful manner. And I think that's the reflection on action, because when they do, it's kind of loop. I think when you do one action, if it's not, so until you reach the best, the optimum, as Vivian said. So the how can be improving yourselves right up to PhD level. It could be changing your career from investment banker to become and going to Africa. So you went to Africa, right? Yeah. To advise on climate smart solutions for investors. So I think the key thing for us to remember is that the environment is forever changing, and you need to be very aware of the change, and you need to adapt as well as lead the change, not just adapt and follow, but to also lead the change, as I think you have seen them doing. Now I'm going to move to the second 5 minutes. We'll go again this way, okay? Because you've had a long rest. Is how do you prepare the younger generation to become like you, for example? Okay?
Okay, so essentially what we need to do as a society, right? I'll do it in two parts. One is what we should all do, and then perhaps reflect on what I have done, right? For the first thing that we need to do as a society is to understand that women need a helping hand, right? And it doesn't matter if it's from women or from men, but they need a helping hand. It's not because they are some sort of princess you need to rescue. No, that's not it. It's not a fairy tale. But because they go through many stages in life, they can't have it all at the same time, right? This concept of can you have it all? I would love to say that it is a reality. The fact is it's not, right? You can have it all, yes, but just not all at the same time. And that's a reality a woman has to face. And it's different for a man because, well, that's the way the cards are. It's not their fault, it's not anybody's fault, that's the way it is. So you need a helping hand. And this needs to come from everybody, from men and women, right? You cannot do it with just 50% of the population trying to help you. The entire population needs to come together. I think that's the key thing. If you look at the statistics that were out in terms of the gaps that was identified by the Ministry of Women, in 2020, what they realized is that you had 55% of women who are on the labor force as opposed to 80% of men. And this was in 2020, yeah? And the report was released in 2021. What you will find is after the pandemic, that probably has become worse because women as primary caregivers would have had to drop out of workforce in order to deal with family situations. This goes back to you can't have it all at the same time. But that's where the men come into play, right? When a woman takes a break from her career, how can you help them get back on the saddle, so to speak, right? So that's what we all need to do. Now, in terms of what I am trying to do, I have an organization which looks at ESG. And this is consultancy in ESG for companies. How can you drive your business to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion to be resilient for the changes that are coming, right? The workforce has changed, meaning that your Gen Z is not going to be okay with having a brown bag lunch meeting, right? That's going to change. And this is men and women. So if you're going to have this type of a workforce coming into play, you can't just rely on 50% of the population to fill that gap. Let's be honest, everybody here who owns who's part of an organization or runs an organization, the biggest issue that you have right now is the fact that you do not have enough talent to go around, right? So do you really want to discount 50% of the population? I think the answer is no. So more so with the workforce and the shifting mindset and mentality of not wanting to work beyond what they are paid for, you need everybody that you can find to be part of the solution for your own organization. So that's where ESG comes in, right? So you look at it, and that's the S part of it. Now that's the S part of it. Does it not involve the other two? No, it does. Why? Because at the end of the day, the governance part comes into play. Make sure they are paid well, right? Make sure that they're paid equally as you would anybody else. And that's what I try to practice in my own organization as well. That's what I hope to get other organizations that I advise to do as well, right? So that's the other key thing. Just because a person is, going to go, you hired someone and they are married and they likely would want to start a family doesn't mean that you get to pay them less. That's not something you can do. And the thing is that whether you like it or not, an organization, word of mouth travels. Are you going to be an organization that is equipped to deal with the way that the people are looking at organizations? They don't just join for the money, yeah? The values have to be there. The organization must be adept in understanding what the generations are looking at. And this, it's about diversity, it's about inclusion, it's about the culture of your organization. You need to change. And all of this is part of ESG. It's the whole structural way of looking at an organization. So this is what we all need to do, and this is what I am trying to do within my organization to push this when it comes to other organizations implementing it as well. So this is something that I would like all of you all to think about. But for the women here, don't despair. It will come. It just will not just come all at the same time, right? Whatever you want to do, you can do, but understand that there is no shame in taking a break from your career because you have other priorities. Because you're a human being, you're not a robot, right? So just understand that it can be done. And I think that with people joining this conversation, what I see is that this conversation is being held more and more often, right? And in the 30% club that I'm part of, we look at women in leadership positions. How do you get that 30% part done, not just in the lower levels, but also in the upper echelons of power, right? How do we get that? So all of this is important to understand that there are different agendas being pushed and the conversation is being had. So we can all be part of this. So that's sort of what I have to add.
All right. So since I think I'm the only one who is actually in the education business here, so I think I'll just take on more of that perspective, yeah? And the topic that we're talking about is about nurturing the next generation of youths and leaders, right? And, you know, we get this question a lot. And I also just like to pose it back to you and just to think about it for a second. What does it mean to be future ready? What does it mean? We throw it around all the time. Oh, we need to be future ready. What does it mean? So in our social enterprise, we actually took it very seriously and developed a framework for future ready talents or individuals. And we found that it actually condenses into 4 parts. It might sound simple, but the whole play of it, when it comes together, that's when a character's true unique strengths really come to life, the unique value creation. So the 4 parts are, firstly, it is technical competency. Like it or not, we still need to be good at something, right? So the first part is very obvious, it's technical competencies. And I think I can give a personal example of myself later, and we can also think of how can we create more future-ready talents with these 4 areas. So the second area is what we call human competencies. Before I just explain about it, have the people in this room read the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report that was just released, I think, last month or this month? Future of Jobs report. Just give a nod if you have read it. Okay, I think majority of people haven't read it. Yeah, so essentially, if you flip to the page that talks about the core skills of the future, I think there's about 26 of them, you will notice that the use of technology, the development of technology, only accounts for 4 out of 26 of those core skills moving forward. And the rest of them are to do with being human. It is about how do we communicate? How do we think more deeply, to think critically, to think creatively? How do we build strong relationships that last? How do we consider ethics and sustainability? How do we take into account social issues and rights and things like that? All of these are about being human. And I think gone are the days where you're good at something and you can rise to the top of your career. That's gone. Nowadays, if we want to succeed and to scale new heights for not just the young generation, but also at any age, I think it's imperative for us to put the human part back. Because if we continue to, act like machines and develop talents to be like machines, then humans, our talents, can be easily replaced by machines. So now it is the time that we integrate the human part back into the equation. And that's why we call it human competencies. Not soft skills. Yes, there are some overlaps of soft skills. Soft skills tend to be quite externally driven. How do I appear professional? How do I not piss someone off, right? And things like that. But human competencies is about going back to the core, connecting with our inner self. If we feel a certain emotion, instead of trying to just cope with it and be like, oh, how do I appear calm? The deeper question is, why do I feel angry right now? What is that emotion? What is that information trying to tell me about what's going on? And how can I create a better outcome? So it is really about connecting with ourselves deeper, not just thinking, but think about thinking. Not just to feel, but to feel about your feeling, and to think about your feeling, and to think about your actions, to be more intentional. So that's the second part, human competencies. It's what makes us human. So technical competency, human competency, and the third part is aligned passion or interest. I think we can hear from the panelists today that all of us are very passionate about what we do, and that purpose or passion or interest is one of the key driving forces for us being able to scale new heights and be resilient, because we know why we're here. We know the kind of value that we want to create. So that's a third part, aligned passion or interest. And the last part is adaptable, lifelong learner. Because as we know, things keep changing. I think we don't need to explain this so much. We all need to continue to learn. So that's the 4 parts to the model, and we call it the OTI talent. OTI. Okay, so it's actually a fusion of 2 Malay words. So for those who are Malaysians, just say out the word and then you can shout back what is the meaning. Otak. Otak, what's the meaning? Brain, yeah? Brain? Okay. And hati. What's the meaning of hati? Heart. Right. So it is the fusion of brain and heart, of our mind and heart. And that's why we came up with the word OTI. Otak and hati. So that is the OTI model. I think I've just run out of time. So before I pass it back over, I would also just like to link it back to the topic of women. And from the first part, we talked about self-resourcefulness, right? So I think when we are nurturing talents in our social enterprise, the kind of focus is not just to empower them with knowledge and tools, but it is really to empower them to self-empower, so that ability is sustainable, that they can actually be self-resourceful in their own lives and their careers as well. So one question that I would like to pose to everyone here, the women and the men as well, about opportunity. When it comes to providing opportunity or even giving yourself opportunities, do you have bias? Do you look at yourself, oh, maybe I'm just not as good as other people or as men, right? Because that bias will stop us. And do we think that of other people? Perhaps even women. Do we think that of other women? Oh, she's a female. She's not capable of this. That bias, right? And even men, right? Do you think that? Do you men have that kind of bias that kind of stops other people from this opportunity? Yeah. So I think I'll just stop there. Just as reflection. First is how can we empower people to self-empower? And the second is how can we open up the opportunities for these people to have that avenue to grow and create value. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Well, in fact, here today I have 3 of my younger colleagues with me. I have Miss Nadia, Miss Tamarai, and Miss Nazifa over there. So that's the future generation. So this is part of their training. So this is again where we're trying to give them exposure and for them to increase their knowledge. So that's part of assisting and building up the new talents. And also, Ms. Ahila was saying about the labor force participation rate for women. It is very low compared to other countries. We are at the currently 55.5% women in the labor market, the labor force participation rate, as compared to men at 80.9%. So then we'll start to think where will be the women, you know? Yes, Tan Sri. So it's quite unfortunate. Despite, if we are looking at the education level, women have achieved so much at every level. You're talking about elementary, secondary, and up to tertiary level. But when it comes to labor force participation rate, it is still quite low as compared to men and also other ASEAN countries. So this is where the missing link. So most probably, you know, we are thinking where do women go despite having all this great education. So most probably it goes back to the question of they, having other responsibilities that they need to look into. And for the budget 2023, the government put a priority in terms of trying to have more women into the labor market. Because as we said, about 50% of the population, 30% actually women in the for the Malaysian population. So if we are missing, they are not coming into the labor market, so we are actually going to lose our assets. So for budget 2023, the government announced to put priority for the women to come back to the labor market after they taking a break. But the reality in Malaysia is that they would go, right after graduating from universities, they would go into the labor market. But, you know, after they get married, they're having children, then they would go out of the labor market. And the sad thing is that they never come back. So that's where, you know, we are losing the talents for among the female population in Malaysia. So we're hoping that to have more family-friendly policies and women-friendly policies. So among others that we're looking into is to have more childcare centers to have in the office, so that it will help to attract more women to come into the labor market. Even though someone may be saying like, but why would be the task of taking care of the children falls it only to the women? But I don't know. I mean, some of the men here must say like, you know, they must be thinking because the children usually, we are still thinking that the mothers would be the one who would be taking care of the children. But the thing is, it will be quite a task for the women for them to have that dual responsibility. But I believe with support, that would be able to have more women to join the labor market. And then we're looking at trying to increase their labor force participation rate, so that would help the country because they are very educated. So they would be the talents that the companies that will be looking into to get more capable people coming into the labor market. So hopefully that would we would have cooperation. So this is something that's not only a task that could be done by only one ministry. And I think everybody has to work together, the public and private sector, to look into how to get more women coming into the labor market, so then they can have they can contribute back to the society with their skills and competencies, and something that we hope women can take up the challenge and to be able to provide their best in whatever that they're planning to do. Thank you, Dan.
Yes. So, how are we nurturing the next generation? In any domain we seek to address, I think we should interrogate the landscape, understand what the problem is, and then we can figure out what the solutions are. So what is the problem? What are women like? And how do they differ from men in some key aspects? Well, since the majority of people here are women, you might recognize yourself here. If you're going to apply for any job, do you only apply if you meet 100% of the criteria? And what about men? Do they do the same? Well, studies have shown that women, as I mentioned just now, tend to apply only if they meet almost all the criteria, while men very confidently will put themselves forward if they meet a portion of the criteria. So what does this mean? It means that if you write a JD, a job description, that seeks the perfect candidate, like, you know, sustainability expert, CSO with, let's say, a decade, 2 decades experience, you know that's a bit like a unicorn in these days, right? No women, okay, I shouldn't say no, very few women would apply. So understanding bias will help you to broaden the pool to people who are equally qualified. So if you are aware of this, and you should be aware of this if you're a leader, then you should consider changing your procedures accordingly to ensure you have the best candidates possible. So that's one. Well, but first of all, are we in the first place talking about people who are just as competent as men? Are we? So let me offer 3 examples. Has anyone heard of Katherine Johnson? Or let me ask an easier question. Has anyone seen the movie Hidden Figures? So who here, man or woman, or if you have friends, that counts too, although you might have Nobel laureate friends, who can calculate manually without calculators, ChatGPT and all, the calculations to get to the moon? So Katherine Johnson was an African-American woman. I can't even say scientist because she was, sort of an analyst at NASA. She could do that. And in fact, she was so accurate that when NASA began using computers, they asked her to check the computer's calculations. And we know now that her calculations were incredibly accurate because, those rockets really reached the moon. That's one woman. That's one story. Let me offer another example. Indra Nooyi. So the story goes, now I don't know her personally, so this is the story that she allegedly told. So she was named CEO of PepsiCo, and it's obviously, a major achievement. Now, when she got home from work that day, if I remember the story correctly, and I apologize if, I made a mistake. She met her mother-in-law in the kitchen, and her mother-in-law got her to go out straight away and get milk because her husband, for whatever reason, I don't know if he was, too tired from work or his day, was not able to get milk on the way back. So I can't help but think that, if it were a man, if it were my husband who just became CEO or had any major accomplishment, right, I would be preparing, a celebration. I wouldn't be asking him to get out there and get milk or anything. But that shows how women very often, maybe some of you have incredibly enlightened, awesome mother-in-law, spouses, all that. But most women we know have to shoulder both burdens. And, regardless of regardless of how successful you are, I know many women leaders, CEOs, ministers. If no one truly has it all because they feel that there's always something they could do for their families, for their companies, for their countries, and so on. Work's never done. Work can never be perfect. You have limited time. We all have only 24 hours a day, and there's something called sleep, right? So that's instructive. So how do we, as leaders, as CEOs, as ministers, and so on, what are the policies that we should promulgate to support women, and hence families, and hence society? This is not about women. This is the health of all of us. This is about the happiness of society and the sustainability of our lives. All of us, right? So, instructive and hence food for thought, I would submit. The third example, Kathleen Karinko. We've all heard about COVID, correct? So Kathleen is one half of an awesome couple starting at University of Pennsylvania, studying the mRNA vaccines. And, today we know them as the scientist couple that essentially started BioNTech. So I think hopefully you guys recognize it now. So obviously highly competent, obviously highly resilient because, getting grants when no one really understands your domain is tough. There's a time when everything is hot. AI went through 2 winters. mRNA did as well, right? So she wasn't just highly competent, she was incredibly resilient as well. which frankly is like a lot of women we know. Just that, not everyone, invents a vaccine that saves the world. But we know the stories. We live the stories. And these women are all around us. So one, yes, we can. We have done it throughout history, and we will continue to do it again and again and again. Now, the second, yes, we must. Why? Who cares? Well, obviously, the world faces tremendous challenges. It's not just climate change, it's inequality, it's jobs, because, just look at, have you heard of a company called Chegg, CHEGG, right? So ChatGPT is going to severely impact jobs. It's not 1/3 of jobs, I don't believe. I would be willing to put money in escrow to test how strongly people really believe it's only 1/3. The consequences will be far-reaching. The consequences are already revealing themselves, I think, if you are studying it carefully. So we have tremendous challenges with climate, with biodiversity. Malaysia, we are suffering through a heat wave now, not just in this country, but in all of Asia. Cyclone Mocha just ravaged both Bangladesh and Myanmar. I'm sorry, not the whole country, but parts of it. So there are tremendous challenges that we face, and we need all of us working, serving together, right? All our expertise. So we must do our best to serve, to lead, and to nurture one another with examples, with role models, with opportunities, with the right feedback at the right time. And yes, we will. How? So, can I have the slides, please? Just a few, don't worry. Okay, so the importance of gender equality in society. I think if you look at that, I'll just point out that the axis on the left really only goes up to 10. So the columns may look really tall, but we're really talking about less than 10% of people thinking that gender equality matters. That's nice, right? And okay, so these are sort of, this is the Reykjavik Index for Leadership from 2022. So leadership index showing, progress on gender diversity or women leadership in various countries, not just in Singapore. So, I think it's easier to show stats in one country that seems to be sort of within the ASEAN range, if you don't mind. So take a look at this. Women are seen to be better at pretty much just 3 industries, right? No prizes for guessing what they are. Childcare, healthcare, well, that's good, well-being, fashion and beauty. So, what about AI? The CTO of OpenAI that came out of ChatGPT, that's a woman. And, there are tons of examples, so I'm not going to go through all of them. But these numbers are disappointing. And so I think it's important to show that highly capable experts exist, and they happen to be women. I'll just offer one more stat, because I heard about a study where... Can this be the last slide? Yes. Okay, we need to ask. Yes. So this would be my last point, where women leaders apparently do worse than male leaders. That sounds disappointing, doesn't it? How about if we combine that with another point that says that women leaders, women CEOs in particular, are chosen more often at times of crisis, which means that when they are appointed, they are asked to tackle far more pressing problems when the ship is taking in water and it's about to sink. So it's not ceteris paribus. So again, let's look at the data. Let's really have confidence in how we have done, and let's build this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I open to the floor, just to summarize, I think in preparing future leaders, as mentioned by all 5 speakers, or no, 4, left with 4, we need to be aware of the obstacles first, the obstacles faced by women. And we acknowledge, of course, that a lot of women are educated, highly educated, they're competent, but yet this is not translated into the workforce because of the obstacles they face. And I think Vivian has identified quite a few. I think confidence issue, even though they're looking to be perfect before they apply for jobs, for example. Whereas men are more confident, so there's a confidence issue there. Then there's stereotyping, where women have to do the household chores, take care of the children, take care of the elderly, take care of the spouses even. And of course, the impact of climate change and pandemics and so on, they affect women more adversely, to be more general. So I think they have also identified some of the ways that we can help to address women, and as stated by all of them, we need to work together. And you can work at education level, work on the individuals, and thank you for identifying all those left brain and right brain issues, okay? Logic, emotion, and don't forget the ethical mind. Yeah. Then we have policy at government level, at firm level, for example, the the ESG principles. If you incorporate, they'll be more gender sensitive. And not to forget, with education comes awareness and role play, and let people look at you and be inspired by you. And of course, not to forget the services and the programs as introduced, for example, childcare and so on. I just want to, before I open up to the floor, without sharing my work as Vice Chancellor, which is the CEO of the university, and we have like 25,000 students and another 15,000 academic and non-academic staff. That's quite a big population. When I first became Vice Chancellor, when I went into the university, I discovered most of the heads of departments, the deans, the directors were men. Similarly in the administrative area, yeah. But the women, more than 70% were women, the students. So it doesn't show the leadership, the students, and the academic staff, the younger ones were also women, but they were not at professorial level, yeah. So how do you address this, Policy is very important, and you have to put in place, followed by procedures, criteria, and so on, So the first thing I said was, whenever there's a vacancy, new appointments to be done, make sure at least one name is, at least one, because then you will force them to go and look and they may find 3. So that policy has to be in place, and you put it in the procedure. And they have to do a kind of self-reporting why they can hold the position and so on. Then I discovered another thing. Even when you put in this policy, you still have this confidence issue. You want to appoint the woman, they come up and say, let someone else do it. They have got to go and take their child from school or whatever. But at the bottom of it is, they don't feel confident to become the dean, for example. And you have to mentor, you have to hold their hands, you have to push them. You have to say, I have confidence in you. Why don't you have confidence in yourself? And when they do it, the first round, they can do it well, and the others get frightened. They won't come up and say, I don't want this job anymore. They will do it. They take it as a challenge, that there's confidence in them, they can do it. And there are also role models. And I, being a woman up there, they can see that they can do it. So I think there are things that you need to do very concretely to make sure women, not just by enlarging the pool that you say, to make sure the candidates are in, you must have it with the policy. And I think at firm level, at institutional level, this is very important. That's where it really works. The other one I want to point and share with you, I want to share with you this work that we are currently doing in Pemuda. If you know Pemuda, which is a private public partnership to ease businesses. Yeah, and what we do, I'm a chairman of 2 technical committees. One of them is on SDG. I don't want to go into ESG and so on for this work, for the companies, because I think people like you are doing it well. What I'm more concerned about is the sustainability for women to be in the workforce. And that is looking at the care industry. Because women will do it, they're doing an unpaid job. So what we want to do is make sure you have good competition, price come down for care of the elderly, child care, because it's very expensive now. But if you open up the industry, you encourage the growth of the industry, then you can have the services. So I think provision of services is very important, but this is paid jobs. And most likely you're going to create jobs for women anyway, as you pointed out, the care industry is where women will excel. But once the pay is good, the men will also move in. I'm not worried about that. But the idea is, let's have something that the woman can fall on to. And that is if you develop this care industry with proper regulations, proper training of people, with proper incentives for the SMEs to grow, the entrepreneurs can get it, the care entrepreneurs, then I think we can go a long way in helping the women to rise up higher and to stay in the workforce. Now I want to open. We have 15 minutes, 16 minutes. Anybody want to say anything? Yes. Do you have a mic?
Here.
Thank you so much. Outstanding panel, and I like that it's also an intergenerational panel. Now, if I...
Exactly.
It's
you want to know my
important,
age?
Very important. I think I would start with an observation. I beg to differ in terms of not having it all. I think this might be discouraging for girls or young women who are looking to a career. I'm not saying in STEM, but in general, looking to a career, but not saying, oh, but I will not gonna get married or not gonna get children. I believe that actually when women are skipping time, months or years sometimes, what it is important, besides to have a childcare system to be helped, and of course the family sometimes comes to play a role, I think it is important to have the right legislation after skipping time to know that that person, no matter the level, professional level, might have the same option, the same job description or comparable with the same payment. So it is important to have this legislation like a safety. That's one thing. Second, I think in a certain way, any young person needs a helping hand. Any young person. Yeah, sometimes, most of the time you are choosing jobs, but sometimes vocation is choosing you. So what it is important, I believe, is perhaps to speak more about the moments in our lifetimes when we failed. And not when or why we failed is not relevant. The relevant is what you do the next day, how you recovered, how you succeed, either to reinvent yourself or but if you want, if you have the energy in yourself to still be out there and looking after opportunities, how you did it. Of course, it's natural to have a tendency to speak about success stories, and they are success stories overall, but come on, life is full of failures, full of moments when you feel that you simply cannot go on. That yes, the day is too short for doing. And I wanted to ask if you had this sort of moments, how you found the energy to go on. Yes, and I think I'm speaking from the privileged category of a person who is relying on a husband who's very supportive. I think he's still here with me in the room. And it goes good after 3 decades of marriage and 4 children to consider that you can have it all, just not in the same day. So you need to prioritize in order
Anybody
to
want
manage
to
it.
respond?
I guess I'll have to respond. I actually agree with you. You can't have it all at the same time. Yes, you can have it all. Just, yeah, just, yeah, we have an extra now.
Yes.
So, yeah, you can have it all. It's just the timing, right? And let's be honest, life gets in the way. And you asked about failures, right? With every change that I made in my career, there was a level of failure that came with it, which is why you redirect it, right? Redirect it and reset your sails, so to speak, right? Was it outright failure? Perhaps I'm privileged. I didn't go through that kind of setback. But even now, my conscious decision of moving on to do my own business is related to the fact that I am trying to have a more balanced lifestyle that deals with the 2 young kids that I have, right? So, and that is a change in my life. Is it a failure? Well, some people would think it is. Some people would think, hey, you're giving up a career and you're doing this, you should try to find a way around it. I don't. I think this is what I need to do that's right for me, and it doesn't matter what other people think. Having said that, the world is not as kind, right? The world is not as kind. And you're right, there needs to be policy. But right now, while there is effort being made with the budget announcement where you're trying to ease women back into the workplace, there's still that bias, right? There's still that bias. Even now, I hear about, oh, there's a gap in the resume of 3 years. I wonder why that is, right? And of course, it can be explained, but you need to get through the door to the interview stage to explain that. And the world is not so kind. So I understand where you're coming from, that you can have it all. I do think you can have it all, but I stand by what I said, not at the same time. Not if you want to have what everybody's asking for, which is a work-life balance. If you want to have a work-life balance, that requires you to sacrifice at some point for your family. Now, I'm lucky, like you. I have a husband who is very involved. So during the pandemic years, when I had to work all the time, he was managing the family, right? Now that it's my turn to do it. So you take turns, right? That's what a relationship is about. It's about compromise and taking turns. But it does happen, and that's the reality. And that's my reality.
But it's a new provision. I just want to respond to the legislation. I think it's very important. Malaysia has made some steps towards legislative changes. I think the key one is the Sexual Harassment Act. Which I think is very important, particularly in the workplace. The other one is, I think, very important to me is the Employment Act, the changes to give paternity leave. Because when you give paternity leave, you send a very powerful signal. You send a powerful signal to the men that they are also responsible for household chores, for care of children. And I think this research has shown, paternity leave by itself has been able to change attitudes. I think it's just a recent study I just read. I think it comes from the US. That just by giving paternity leave, they have looked at the impact of that. So I think there are some things that we change through legislative changes that can also have an impact on keeping women in the workforce. I think we have one more question only, if you have a question. You want to say something maybe after the next question, Vivian? Yeah. One more, yes. Can you come a bit to the center and take the microphone? Make it a question, yeah? Short one.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Wan Maimun Wan Abdullah. I'm the president of Women in Construction Industry Malaysia. So I'm in the construction industry, and it is very technical, technological, contractual, contentious, 3D, difficult, damaging, whatever you have it. So that's construction industry, and I'm in it. So we have a lot of challenges for women. I can put it 3 challenges. Number 1 is we have very few top echelon representation. Very, very few. Number two, women, we come in later. We come in later in the construction industry, 30, 40 years later. So we are not in the level playing field. We are low, behind 40 years men. Number 3, in the construction industry, there's no women agenda. So with that scenario in the construction industry, I would like to give one comment. Number 1 comment. To me, I think architect Ahila and Daphne previously are spot on. We need women to assist women. And I don't feel that. We have to have women in position to push women agenda, to nurture future leaders. Because sadly, in my 40 years in the construction industry, I've met a lot of women representation at the top echelon. Very few.
Yeah.
Sadly, I have to say that they keep on telling me, I cannot be biased, Maimun. I have to be fair. No! Because you are in that position. Yeah, you work hard to get in that position, but because you are in that position, you have a responsibility. Like Spider-Man, with authority comes responsibility.
You got your points.
You
Thank
have the responsibility to assist women. You cannot say that you have to be fair. No. Then somebody says about biasness. Yes, but positive biasness to women. You have to do that. Because why? Because women are not in the level playing field. You have to have agenda for women that goes to assist women. And positive, I keep on saying, positive biasness for women. So all of us in the top echelon, you are in the position, you have to reflect yourself. What have you done? What have you done to empower women? What have you done to play your part in women with that small percentage in the top echelon to assist women to be where you are? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
You know, I remember you very vividly.
last year,
Last year you said the same thing. So this,
Tan Sri.
there has not
Tan Sri.
there have been no changes for a whole year.
No, it's more
For
than
you,
that.
for the
More
construction
than
industry.
that, because there's no changes. And I've done a working paper. I promise you that I'm going to make a working paper on the agenda for women, and I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, you have to give it to her. Yeah, she has to take it up to the ministry. Go and get one. Thank you. You have to work harder, so next year you don't have to speak. Addressed to me. Oh, addressed to NCWO. Okay, I think the closing is going to start soon. So I'm going to ask all of you, in 1 minute, give the takeaway message for everyone here. Vivian, we start with you.
Wasn't expecting that. Well, I think I would just add one thing. I don't like to repeat myself. So I was at an 8-day mindfulness retreat conducted by Fred Zhao. And I think that what we learned would be helpful in building confidence, in transforming ourselves for growth, whether you're men or women. And it will help to build, a consciousness in business or in government for a better society. So my recommendation, therefore, is for you guys to check out this book on quantum leadership by Fred Zhao and Chris Laszlo. He's the best CEO I've known. And the company culture is incredibly human. I think you will find that it's worth your time. Thank you.
Okay, one.
Thank you, Tan Sri.
Last wise words.
I think it's very important to have everyone's cooperation and to materialize the women's agenda. And what like Madam Maimuna was saying just now, I don't believe it's a one person's effort or one ministry's effort. It has to be a collaboration from all ministries, from all sectors, not just public sectors, but also private sectors and even NGOs. And I think NCWO has been very generous and very helpful and committed in helping and pushing towards the women's agenda. And I believe if we are all committed to bring the women up front and making them to be able to deliver and to become the best asset of the nation, I think that will be a reality in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, I think to summarize, I think no matter who we are, what's our race, gender, whatsoever, beliefs, anything, I think the most important thing is to find ways to empower ourselves. I think that's the most important thing. How can we be self-resourceful? So that's for me. Thank you.
Final words is men have to play their part, women have to play their part as well. And someone I respect and admire very much once told me there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. So I'd like you to think about that.
Thank you very much. I will end on that. We've had a very interesting afternoon. We have identified all the obstacles and possible policy, educational, legislative services and programs that could help women progress further in their career. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen.